Hi everybody, it's Nikki here and welcome to a bookish video. So today is my July reading wrap up where I talk about all the books that I read in July. So first of all, I'm going to discuss the books that I didn't get to that were on my TBR. I had three. First of all, The Bane Chronicles by Cassandra Clare. Now, I got as far as putting a bookmark in here. It's now taken back out again. I really was intending to pick this book up near sort of like about halfway through the month, and then I started reading something else, and I kept putting this off, and then realised that I wasn't going to get to it. I read Cassandra Clare Shadowhunter books really slowly. I don't know what it is about them, but I cannot blast through them like I can other fantasy books of the same page count. So I didn't pick it up. The next one I didn't get to was my The Virgin and the Gypsy and Other Stories by D.H. Lawrence. I was planning to sort of read, because these are short stories, I was planning to read like one short story every other day. Didn't get around to it, so yeah, I normally read my classics via audiobook, but I could not find an audiobook with all of these short stories on the one audiobook, so I am going to have to read this one physically myself. So that kind of put me off a little bit from picking it up, but I will read it at some point in the future, just not now. And then the last one I didn't get to was Poison Study by Maria V. Schneider. I honestly thought I was going to get to this one at the end of the month, but ran out of time and just wasn't able to pick it up. So yeah, I didn't get to pick this one up either, but it is the oldest book on my TBR now, so if that prompt comes up on Bookgammon in the future, I know exactly which book to go for. And the last book that I didn't finish, but I did start, and I am halfway through, is The Bat by Jo Nesbø. Like, I started this in June, and I kind of said to myself, I'm going to carry on trying to read it throughout July, and if I haven't finished it by the end of July, I'm obviously not interested and I will DNF, because this is the second time I've tried to read it, got about halfway through and then put it down and not picked it back up again. And as you can see, my bookmark is still in the same place. I don't think I really picked it up. I maybe might have gone an extra 50 pages in the month of July, but I really didn't pick this up. So I've had 2 months to read this and I still haven't finished it. So I'm sorry, it's gonna have to be a DNF, and I'm gonna have to unhaul this. So let's get to the other books. We'll go in order on my thing. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of Nim by Robert C. O'Brien. I was gifted this by the lovely Bex from my book club, and she picked it because she said, this is one of my favourite childhood books and films. I couldn't choose. She also bought me another one, so she couldn't choose between the two, so she bought me both, and she bought me it for Christmas. So thank you very much, Bex. I loved it. I loved it so much. It was such a pleasure to read it, and it really did bring me back to my childhood when I loved this book. I read it as a child, loved it. I think this is where my love of rats has come from, because the rats in here are extremely clever. And we got a bit of a story. It was kind of like a story within a story, because at some point the Rats of Nim explain why they're so clever. And yeah, I loved it. I believe there is a second book, but I think I'm just gonna read this as a standalone, have this as a standalone, because I don't know if a second book will live up to the joys of reading this. So I gave this 3 stars. It wasn't amazing. It didn't blow me away. It was more nostalgic than anything. But it really is a lovely story, and does bring up some points about, you know, using animals for testing and things like that. But yes, I absolutely loved it. It was really such a joy, and I gave it 3 stars. My notes on this say story told within a story, cute childhood nostalgia, which is what I literally just said. The next book I'm going to go to are the 2 graphic novels that I picked up. Now, I actually only needed to read one of these because the prompt was to reread a favourite. But I kind of I read them both because I know that there is a 3rd book in this series which finishes off the trilogy, and I knew I wanted to purchase that very soon. So I thought I would reread the first 2 books so that I'm up to date and can, when I do purchase that 3rd book, I can know where I am. So as they're graphic novels as well, I could knock these out in half an hour, so it wasn't too much to take on 2 of them. So we have The Steel Prince and Knight of Knives, so book 1 and book 2 in this graphic novel trilogy, written by V.E. Schwab for the Shades of Magic series. I've not read Shades of Magic, but I do have the first book in that trilogy. And it was really nice to reread these and remind myself again about the magic system and about some of the characters in here that I really liked. I like the artwork. Let's have a look at my notes. Great artwork, interest in magic, lots of action. There we go. That's about what I was about to say. So yeah, I read those and I gave those both 3 stars. Next thing I read was actually an ebook. So I turned to my Amazon Fire tablet and I read the Salem Witch Trials, a history of I forget what it's called, and my thing is dead. I will put the title here across the screen. This was a very short ebook. It was only, let's have a look. It was only 33 pages, very short. And it was very basic. It wasn't a very detailed history of the Salem witch trials, but it did go into why the witch trials were able to take such a hold on the community, where these people, these Puritans, had come from, and what their faith and their beliefs had developed from. So that was very interesting. It wasn't just about the actual trials themselves, but about why they started, how they started. And it was very interesting. It does make me want to read more about the Salem witch trials. But if you are interested about why they began, it's a good little tiny 33-page ebook that you can quickly read and get some more understanding of. I gave it 3 stars because, as I say, it didn't give me a lot of information. It just gave me enough to pique my interest. So that was that one. What was my notes on that? Concise and to the point, quick read, nothing new to add if you've seen The Crucible, basically. Funny fact, I actually did the play The Crucible in my college for my performing arts course. I enjoyed it. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. And then a few months later, the film came out with whatchamacallit in it. So yeah, fun fact there for you. Next book I read. Okay, so the next book I read was Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. What a mind game this was. I have no idea what I read. I really don't. My notes says either too clever for me or a load of hogwash. Confusing start and an anticlimax ending. if I kind of thought this was going to be something along the lines of Erin Morgenstern or Laini Taylor. It's kind of like Erin Morgenstern on crack. It was weird. Like, there's no explanation about this world, none whatsoever. You have no explanation about who this person is and why they're there in the first place. You just don't. And you go through this book, there is a little explanation nearer to the end about who this Piranesi is and how he got into this strange house, which isn't really a house because it's just a lot of rooms, but there's no end to these rooms, and there's different levels and he's the only one in there apart from the other, who's just a guy who comes once a week to talk to him, or twice a week or something. It was just weird. It was just so, I gave Piranesi, let's have a look. Where are you on my list? This was for my Check Your Shelf readathon. And I gave it 2 stars. I did not enjoy this at all. I mean, it's a beautiful book, but I didn't enjoy the mind games. It just, I was left so confused. I was like, what? By the end of it. So yeah, 2 stars for that one. And that was part of my Check Your Shelf readathon. The next book I read was, again, another ebook. Go me. Haven't read an ebook all year, and then I read 2 in 1 month. So again, on my Amazon Fire, I read The Promise of Hades, the Hades Trial Book 1. This is kind of like a smutty fantasy romance with Hades. Yeah. And my notice was romance fantasy, good storyline, jumps in parts, but is quite funny. Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. If you liked your smutty romance, this is a great one to have. I really enjoyed it. And I gave this one 3 stars. It was only less than 200 pages, so it was a very quick read. Okay, so the next book that I read was the Bath Treasury of Children's Classics edition of Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tales. This is a gorgeous edition. I purchased these through the UK shop The Works, but I don't believe that they stock these anymore, but I have found some of these editions on Amazon since then. So my main notes on this one was brutal, not Disney. Little Mermaid's tongue is cut out. Red Shoes Girl, her feet are chopped off. Yes, apparently, wonder why Disney didn't put those into their films. Apparently, the Little Mermaid doesn't just lose her voice, she loses her tongue. That's why she can't talk. It was brutal. It was really brutal. And the little match girl dies. Spoiler, but it's really brutal. I mean, I knew the original fairy tales were dark, but not being funny. But do you want a version of the original tales? I kind of do. I kind of want to see a film with the original fairy tales as they're told. That darkness. It's kind of morbid of me to say I want a Little Mermaid retelling with her tongue cut out. Also as well, I have a little post-it note in here for the end of this story. Because this was a story called What the Old Man Does Is Always Right. And it says, and I quote, at the end, yes, it always pays best when the wife sees and maintains that her husband knows best and whatever he does is right. I'm just gonna leave that with you. So I gave this one, let's have a look, 3 stars. Are you surprised? So yeah, that was that one. If you haven't read The Old Man Was Always Right, you really should. It'll teach you how to be a better wife, apparently. So yes, I read that one. The next one I read was an audiobook, I believe, on Audible, which I again used my Amazon Fire for. It got a lot of use this month. And that was Traitors Blade, which is the first book written by Sebastien de Castell in the... I can't remember what trilogy it is. My note says brutal, grimdark, not pretty fantasy. Intrigued to read the next one. So yes, this is kind of like the story of these 3 men who used to be like the king's guards, and unfortunately the king was assassinated, killed, and the king's guards were then dispersed, got rid of. Nobody wanted them anymore, but these 3 guys are still kind of trying to do what they used to do, which is get justice for people. And yeah, it was really interesting. I think the thing is, I have them on audiobook, but I really feel like I would appreciate actually reading the physical book with these. It was very, very interesting, and I really do like Sebastien de Castell's writing. The only reason why I have them on audiobook is because the books were on the 2-for-1 offer on Audible. So, and I couldn't find anything else that I really, really wanted. And I've been wanting to try the Traitors Blade books. The Traitors Blade's first one. I can't remember what it's called, the trilogy. But I've been wanting to try those books since reading Spellslinger and starting that series. So when I saw that they were on a 2-for-1 offer, I got book 1 and book 2, and I think now I have book 3 and book 4 as well. I think I know I've definitely got 1, 2 and 3, but I'm not sure I've got 4. But yeah, I managed to get them 2-for-1 on Audible. So yeah, I listened to them on that. And I gave Traitors Blade 4 stars. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I also read that for my Check Your Shelf-a-thon. So yes, that was that one. The next book I read was The Dream Snatcher by Abby Elphinstone. And I listened to this on audio. My notes for this says good opening scene, adventurous, next book has mer creatures. So yeah, I gave this one, the Dream Snatcher, 3 stars. It was very interesting. It starts off with kind of like a bit of a prologue, where it's all very mysterious, and people in cloaks and hoods, so you don't know who they are, and there's no context to this. It's a very very spooky, kind of strange, kind of weird sort of opening. And there is an old woman who is being cursed, basically. And there's no context to that at all. It's completely out of the blue. And then you start the story somewhere else on chapter 1. And it's not until you get further through the book that that prologue becomes in context with the rest of the story, and you're like, oh, that's what that beginning was. And I really, really like it when authors do that in their books. Like, they pull a scene completely out of its timeline and put it somewhere else, and then later on in the book that is explained, and you're like, aha, I remember that bit. So yeah, I really did enjoy this. Definitely want to continue, especially now I know there's mer creatures in the next book. Slightly more interested in. At first I was just gonna say, I don't know if I'm gonna continue this, and then I read the synopsis for the second book because it was kind of niggling me to continue the story, and I saw there were mer creatures, so I'm definitely going to be continuing. But I did give this 3 stars. Really did enjoy it. So yes, that was that one. The next book I read was finally The Kingdom of the Wicked. I finally read it. I finally read this. It is by Kerry Maniscalco. It's got those beautiful decorated edges. This has got to be the most beautiful book ever, like, in my collection. It is so stunning, and this was on my 5 stars prediction. Did it get 5 stars? No, it didn't. No, it didn't. So the notes for this says, lots of food references, wanted more romance, good sense of humour. And I ended up giving this one 3 stars. Yes, 3 stars. Yeah, there was a lot of food references in here. Our main character, Emily, is working in her family restaurant. She hopes to open her own restaurant one time. It's kind of set in Italy. So obviously food, you know, as Brits like our tea and the Italians like their food. Okay, so there was a lot of food references, which kind of made me feel like I was reading a contemporary rather than a fantasy. And then along comes Wrath, and I was like, okay, here we go. He was kind of like a fart in a wet paper bag. I'm sorry, but he was neither sexy nor broody. The fact that he was a little bit miserable towards Amelia didn't really make him sexy and broody in my eyes. The fact that he stood there with his arms crossed for half the time that she had him, that she was meeting him, it didn't really come across as sexy or moody or broody or anything like that. And I was so hopeful for this. Like, you know how excited I was for this book, and it just fell flat for me. It was just like I was expecting this romance to come. There was one moment that I will say I was like, yes, and no. So it just like, it was like it got so close and yet was so far from what I really wanted. I really wanted this to be kind of smutty romance, and it wasn't. I didn't feel any sexual tension between the two. I felt like they were kind of just putting up with each other. Maybe it's a hate to love, but it was a lot of hate, not a lot of love. So yeah, it just kind of fell flat for me, and it got a 3 stars. I mean, it gets 5 stars for beauty, but 3 stars for content. And it kind of, I mean, I'm still going to continue, and I'm going to get the second book, okay? And I'm going to continue the series, and hopefully the second book will give me what I'm really wanting from this story. But I'm not going to fork out the Fairy Loot price of their special edition. I'm just going to get the normal published edition, which will be a hell of a lot cheaper. Because as beautiful as the Fairy Loot editions are, they are hiked up in price. But I mean, they're worth it. But I got this in the Fairy Loot box. I'm just not going to pay the extra price to get the second book in the special edition as well, even though it is gorgeous. I just don't love the story inside, so I can't justify the price for the outside. So yeah, I will continue this story and get the second book, but I just, fingers crossed, it does give me what I want, but it kind of fell flat for me, I'm afraid. The next book I read was 8 Ghosts, and this is written by multiple authors: Mark Haddon, Jeanette Winterson, Andrew Michael Hurley, Sarah Perry, Stuart Evers, Kate Clancy, Camilla Shamshi, and Max Porter, and it is published by English Heritage, and it's basically multiple short stories that are set in or around English Heritage sites. Now, the best bit about this was the English Heritage sites. What I did was, as I started each story, wherever it was set, I would Google that on the computer and have a look at the place that they were talking about. And some of these places are absolutely stunning, and I do want to go and visit them sometime. I love my history, so a lot of these have a lot of history about them. So that's what really made me interested in this. My note says, most stories end with a soap opera reveal. Not the right time to be reading, need the right atmosphere. So yeah, they're ghost stories. So a lot of these did have that kind of like dun 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 kind of ending. That's what I mean by a soap opera ending. Am I going to keep this and reread it in October? Probably not. But I think it would have definitely been much better had I read it in spooky season, because it needed that extra added atmosphere, because there wasn't enough in here to keep me entertained. I will say that some of them were just like, oh really? One or two were good. So this one got 2 stars. The next book I finished was The Three Musketeers by Alexander Dumas. Now, okay, so I listen, as I said earlier, to all my classics on audiobook. So I got the audiobook for this on Scribd, and it was over 20 hours. And I'm looking at this book going, 20 hours? Really? It's only 300 pages. Yeah, this edition is the abridged version, because at one point I thought I would sit and read along with it, try to find where I was in the audiobook, and realised that some of the words that were being said were not in the book. Some of it waffled on like completely, and then so yeah. I believe this is an abridged version of The Three Musketeers. Should have known it because it is the children's library. Golden Library, edition. Now these were available with the Daily Mail for £2.60. So I can understand why the full version of The Three Musketeers was 20 hours, because Alexander Dumas does do those big books, like The Count of Monte Cristo was over 20 hours. So yeah, I mean, I really did enjoy the audiobook. I think if I was to reread this, I would just read this copy. So my note says, my physical copy is abridged, but the audio was the full version, which I've just mentioned. Political intrigue. Narrator had a soothing tone. Yes. The one thing about listening to the book on audiobook was that the narrator had such a beautiful voice. And obviously he used like a French sort of tone to his voice when he was saying some of the names, doing some of the speech as well. He used kind of like a French accent when he was doing the speech for the characters. And it was so lulling and really relaxing to listen to him that sometimes I would zone out on the story and be like, what just happened again? And have to rewind it. So that happened quite a few times. So the narrator in the audiobook that I listened to had a beautiful voice. Kind of fell in love with the guy a little bit. But the story, absolutely thoroughly enjoyed. Dogtanian. I keep wanting to call him Dogtanian because of the TV series, the cartoon series. D'Artagnan was such a lovable rogue, and I just loved him. He was cheeky. I really liked him. So yeah, I gave this one 3 stars, I think. Yeah, 3 stars. Lots of 3 stars this month. The next one I listened to on audio from Scribd was The Prince and the Pauper. It was only a 2-hour audiobook, so I thought I was playing Animal Crossing and I needed an audiobook to listen to while I was doing that, because I was terraforming and it gets quite boring after a while. So I listened to The Prince and the Pauper, which is the story about the prince and the pauper who look very much alike, and they decide to swap lives for a day. My notes say Lady Jane Grey and Princess Elizabeth were mentioned, so it's obviously set during the Tudor time period. Interesting look at the rich-poor divide in Tudor England. Prince Edward was going to be a good king. That's kind of what I got from this. Prince and the Pauper was written by Mark Twain. And I got the feeling that Mark Twain was kind of insinuating that had Prince Edward lived to be an adult, he died sadly quite young. I believe he was 16 when he died. That Mark Twain believes he would have been a good king. I don't know if this is kind of propaganda on Mark Twain's part, but the Prince Edward's character in The Prince and the Pauper acted in such a way that he wanted to put right some of the wrongs that he came across while he was portraying to be the pauper, and when the Pauper was the prince, it showed that the prince's life is not as easy and as wonderful as we make it out to be. So it was a very interesting look at this rich-poor divide, and also this idea that Prince Edward would have been a wonderful king had he lived into his adulthood. It was very interesting. I'd like to know a bit more about Mark Twain and who Mark Twain was as a person, just to kind of understand why he would write such a book about an actual living, well, not a living person at the time, but an actual person in history such as this. But it was really nice to see Lady Jane Grey mentioned, who was the 9-day queen, who actually ruled for 13 days, I believe, but 9 days apparently sounds better. And Princess Elizabeth. So it was very, very interesting to see them mentioned. So yes, I really enjoyed that. I gave that one, Prince and the Pauper, I gave that one 3 stars as well. The next book I read was Lady Chatterley's Lover by D.H. Lawrence. This was our book club pick for July, and I really enjoyed this. I will say, and I believe I mentioned it in my notes, it's not like the film on Netflix that I watched. There are some differences, some bits that are left out, some bits that are changed, but that's quite normal for book to film adaptations. Apparently she had an affair before she met Mella, and I can see why it was banned, because there's very coarse language used in here. Wink an eye if this was published nowadays. But I really did enjoy it. She, at one point, our main character, Lady Chatterley, does get a little bit whiny. Like, you do love me, don't you? You won't leave me, will you? And I'm like, shut up, woman. Desperate much? But yeah, very different to the film. I think if I was to have the book or the film, I'd probably sit and watch the film. I'm just gonna say that. I think the film did it better. I like the version that I watched. But yeah, I quite enjoyed it. I gave this one 3 stars. So there's that. The next one I read was Uglies by Scott Westerfeld. What can I say? This is my favourite book ever. Okay, I absolutely adore this series. This was the group book for the Check Your Shelf readathon that I did throughout July. How did you do? Did you do well? Did you complete it? I did. I'm so chuffed with myself that I managed to complete my Check Your Shelf readathon. And it was so wonderful to be back in this world again. I took this slowly this time. Normally I zoom through and I don't make notes, I don't annotate, I don't do anything. But this time I actually made notes in a separate notepad, not in the book. And I actually did some research into some of the quotes that are at the beginning of each part. So here we have a quote here which says, "Is it not good to make society full of beautiful people?" Which is a quote by Yang Wan, quoted in the New York Times. I actually looked up that article and read the article, and really delved into it like that. So a dystopian, thoughtful book of beauty versus brains, futuristic tech fun. I love everything about this book. I love the technical world that this is situated in. I love how people of our time are referred to as rusties. Kind of want to call myself that on a daily basis. I love it. I absolutely love it. I am reading the second book, Pretties, as my buddy read with Charlotte for August. So yeah, I'm not going to be doing a review on that one, but or taking as many notes. I'm just going to sit down and enjoy reading Pretties. But yeah, I absolutely love this book. 5 stars. I don't even have to look at my notes to tell you what rate I gave this one. 5 stars. It always will be. I love this series with all of my heart. So yeah, that's that one. And the final book I read, you were waiting for it. You were going, Nicola, did you? Did you not? Yes, I did. I finished Eye of the World. It took me from day 1 to day 30. But I did finish The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan, the first book in the Wheel of Time series. I did it. Look at it. You can see. Like, can you, that's where my hands had hold of it. Up here, nice and cream still. Down here, filthy, filthy. It was just ink smudge. That's what it is. I got a lot of ink on my hands from this. Loved it. Loved it, loved it, loved it. It says, my notes say, Lord of the Rings vibe, strong female characters, great world, magic and villains. Yes, I got very much Fellowship of the Ring vibes from this. You have these normal village boys suddenly being taken out of their normal everyday farming life and taken on a trip throughout the world, magical world, in order to save the world. Remind you of anybody? Frodo, Pippin, Merry, you know. In this case we have Rand, Matt and Perrin. But this time we have 2 girls coming along with them as well. And I like that. The one thing about the Lord of the Rings trilogy is there's not many female characters in it. In here we have a few extra females. Our Gandalf character is actually a female called Moraine. But yeah, I really thoroughly enjoyed it. There was a bit of a romance that kind of appeared out of the blues all of a sudden. I was like, oh, what? When did that start? Did I miss something in here? I don't know, but that was a little bit random, but you know, I'll go with it. I'll go with it. It's fine. I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. I loved it so, so much. Do I need to check? Do I? Where is it? 5 stars. I shouldn't have really had to check. I knew it was either 4 or 5. I gave it 5. I loved it. It was my book of the month. Because I don't want to put Uglies as my book of the month, because that kind of cheating, because I know I love that. But yeah, this was my book of the month. I've already ordered book 2. It's waiting. It is sat at Waterstones as we speak, or as I speak, because you're not speaking. It is sat at Waterstones as I speak, and is waiting for me to be going in and collecting it, which I will be doing at the weekend. So yeah, thoroughly enjoyed this. We'll be starting book 2 as soon as possible. It's not on my August TBR, but it's going to be. So yeah, loved it. I probably won't rush through book 2 as quickly as I sort of went through this one. I will be picking it up sort of when I've got a bit of spare time or whatever, in amongst all my other books that I'm reading for August. But yeah, I'm in no rush to like get through all of these books because there's like 14 books in the series. But I did thoroughly enjoy it. So that was all the books that I read in August. I forgot to do my stats at the beginning of this video. So let's do it the other way around this time. I'll do the stats at the end. So here are the stats. The total number of books I read was 16 books. Yeah, in July, I was back to my old self reading 16 books. I couldn't believe it. I was just, the first 2 weeks, especially of July, I was in such a reading mood and I just barreled through my books so quickly. The other reason why I got through so many books as well was because I picked out, I kind of went through my TBR list and searched on Scribd for every single book to see if I could get it on audio or not. Because I realised that in previous months my reading has gone down because I've been so busy playing Animal Crossing, because I'm addicted. It's a problem. I have a serious problem. So I decided that I would listen to audiobooks while I was playing Animal Crossing because, as I say, when I'm doing mundane tasks such as terraforming or shaking trees or whatever, I don't really need to have the sound on, so I could listen to an audiobook instead. So yeah, I managed to find quite a few of my books on audio, so I was able to listen to them while playing Animal Crossing. So yeah, physical pages that I read was 2,807 pages. The e-pages, I decided to count them separately this time, was 224. The audio hours of books that I own, so I own the physical copy, but I decided to listen to them via audiobook. Total number of hours was 43 hours and 24 minutes. So that just goes to show that I was able to pick out some books that I wanted to read on Scribd. But unowned books, so books I don't own a physical copy of, the total number of hours of those was 14 hours and 53 minutes. So I'm using my Scribd audiobooks and my Audible books. Audible books, I try to purchase the ones that I don't own but I'm interested in, whereas Scribd, I'm happy to use that for books that I already own just so I can get them read. Because Scribd is a lot cheaper than Audible. Star ratings. So I had 2 5 stars, 1 4 star, 11 3 stars. I wonder what my average rating is going to be for the year. 2 2 stars, no 1 stars, which means so far this year I've had no 1 star reads. And I had 1 DNF, which was The Bat. Genres, I had 1 thriller, no contemporaries, 3 classics, which I'm very happy to have read, 3 middle grades, 2 mangas and graphic novels, 1 non-fiction and 6 fantasy and sci-fi. So something from every category apart from contemporaries. I'm quite happy with that. Very happy with that. So yeah, the origin of books. So I read 4 that were borrowed, so either through Audible or through the library or whatever, and 12 were owned. The format of the books that I read, 9 I read physically, so that is I opened the book and I read the page. I read 5 audibly and I read 2 e-bookily. Is that a word? So 2 on ebook. The binding of those physical books that I read, 4 were hardback, 8 were paperback, and the genders of the authors, 8 were male, 6 were female, and 2 were other. So that is where there was multiple authors, like the 8 Ghosts short stories compilation, or the Salem Witch, and should I say, the Salem Witch Trials, which just said the author was hourly history. So I don't know if that's male or female. It doesn't tell me an actual author's name. So that was it. That was my July wrap up. How many books did you read in July? Don't compare yourself to me. You read how you read, and as long as you are enjoying what you're reading, it doesn't matter how many books you read. But I am interested. How many books did you read? What was your favourite book of the month? And have you read The Eye of the World, and are you going to continue with the series? Let me know in the comment section down below. It may come along because you know I like to have a little bit of a waffle with you. And I will speak to you in the next video. Bye!